Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to take part in this conference, and I want to express my gratitude to the organizers for inviting me and to the speakers for their interesting contributions. Located at the southwestern border of the Assyrian Empire, in an arid region, agriculturally marginal, and apparently without economic advantages, Edom experienced from the late 8th to the 7th century BCE a period of relative prosperity and increased settlement. The Edomite society developed, reached a certain political centralization, and profit from the Arabian trade and from the intensified copper mining in the Arabah. In the same period, Assyria expanded to the west and gained control over the whole Levant. In less than 200 years, most political entities in the region lost their independence, and more than 20 provinces were established. Imperial Assyria applied different strategies of rule, and it is in the frame of the Assyrian expansion that the developments in Edom, as well as the low level of Assyrian impact on the local material culture, can be understood. In the Iron Age too, the eastern part of modern Jordan was divided into 3 independent kingdoms, mostly known by their biblical names Ammon, Moab, and Edom. The Transjordan Plateau is divided by several wadis running from east to west that represent natural but flexible borders between the mentioned kingdoms. In the Neo-Assyrian sources, these political units were named Bit Aman, Ma'ab, and Udumu. Udumu is attested from the reign of Adonai III to the reign of Ashurbanipal. It is one of the rare cases of a loyal vassal that never defied Assyria, so that no military action was necessary. This favorable situation for the development of Udumu raises an unfavorable situation for the historian. As no military campaigns were taken against Udumu, no cities were besieged, captured, plundered, or destroyed, and no executions or deportations took place, there is very few information in the Assyrian written sources. However, this information is valuable because, first, it is contemporary, and second, it allows to date and complement the archaeological data and a few native sources. The earliest attestation of Udumu in the Neo-Assyrian sources occurs in a stone slab with a Sumer inscription of Adad-Nirari III, found in Nimrud, the ancient Assyrian capital Kalhu. I quote, "From the bank of the Euphrates I subdued the land Hatti, the land Amuru in its entirety, Tyre, Sidon, Israel, Edom, and Philistia, as far as the Great Sea in the west. I imposed tribute upon them." Hatti and Amuru are 2 toponyms used in the Neo-Assyrian sources for denoting the northern and the southern Levant. Lamentably, Udumu is not mentioned in any other of Adad-Nirari's inscriptions, but the submission of the mentioned places most probably took place after the defeat of Damascus in 796, during the last of his 4 military campaigns to the west. The Assyrian kings implemented 2 main strategies of rule: the submission by means of loyalty oaths, which made foreign state vassals of the empire, and the annexation of whole regions as provinces. In the first case, the vassals retain a certain independence in internal politics at the price of paying annually a tribute and of being loyal to Assyria. Furthermore, both unequal partners obligated themselves to mutual military aid. In the second case, a former independent state became part of the land of Ashur, lost its independency, was renamed, and governed by an Assyrian official. One of the most outstanding features of the Assyrian Empire was pragmatism, so that the most convenient solution was applied in each case. A state could become a vassal after a military action or by own decision in order to avoid destruction or casualties. Sometimes they remained vassals up to the fall of Assyria, as in the case of Edom. In other cases, after repeated rebellion, they were annexed as a province. In some cases, there was an intermediate step, namely deposing a rebel king and appointing a pro-Assyrian ruler, but this solution was not effective, and usually an annexation followed. In few cases, mostly during the recovery of the former borders of the Middle Assyrian Kingdom in the 9th century, a region was directly annexed. The terminology used in the above quote passage of Adatnari's inscriptions, Biltu Madatu Elishunu Ukin, points clear to an imposition of tribute rather than to audience gifts brought spontaneously. These kinds of gifts were brought in situ to the king in the course of a military campaign, mostly in the first phase of the Assyrian expansion during the reigns of Ashurnasirpal II and Shalmaneser III, when new regions were approached and after a demonstration of power in a neighbor region as preventive measure. This was the case during Ashurnasirpal's 9th campaign, when Phoenician coastal cities brought gifts to the king after he washed his weapons in some place at the Mediterranean coast. On the contrary, it is plausible to assume that Udumu became an Assyrian vassal around 796. It is important to notice that Udumu was not among the confederates of the first great anti-Assyrian alliance, which confronted Shalmaneser III at Karkaru in 853 on the Orontes, nor in the later alliances from 849, 48, and 45, while Israel, Arab tribes, and probably Ammon took part. Either Edom was not so far developed at that time in order to deliver a military unit, or decide not to participate. The situation in the southern Levant changed dramatically during the reign of Tiglath-Pileser III, when the whole region came under Assyrian control after 4 devastating military campaigns in 738, 34, 33, and 32. And no more full independent state remained, but only provinces and vassals. Tiglath-Pileser's most detailed Sumerian inscription, written shortly after 729, contains a geographical summary of his military achievements. The historical section ends with a list of tributary kings of the West, and its last part concerns the southern Levant from Arvad to Gaza, and represents the tribute bearers from 734. Kaushmalaka of Edom is named together with Sanipu of Bitaman, Salamano of Moab, being the first attestation of an Edomite ruler. The next attestation of Edom in a royal inscription concerns a delicate episode reported in a fragmentary prism from the reign of Sargon II. This version of the Annals reports that in 713 he marched against Ashdudu, the biblical Ashdod. The inhabitants of this Philistine coastal city, led by a certain Yamani, removed the pro-Assyrian king Ahimiti. Yamani, enthroned as new king, intended to gain support from their neighbors Judah, Edom, and Moab, which Sargon calls his tributaries, as well as from Egypt. Sargon conquered Ashdod and deported the usurper. We have no information about the reaction of Edom and the other parties concerning the requested support, but as no retaliation is attested, it seems that they remain loyal to Assyria. The governor of Kalhu, Marduk Remani, mentions in a letter to the king that maybe dated early in the reign of Sargon or in the last years of Tiglath-Pileser, the reception of horses brought as tribute by emissaries from Egypt, Gaza, Judah, Moab, and Ammon. In the following lines, the envoys from Edom, Ashdod, and Ekron are mentioned in a fragmentary passage, attesting the presence of an Edomite delegation in Kalhu at that time. A fragmentary wine list from Kalhu, an administrative text listing allocation of wine to people of western regions, mentions Edom together with Ashdod, Gaza, and also Judah, and may be related with the embassy referred to in the above-mentioned letter. 12 years after Sargon's campaign against Ashdod, undertook Sennacherib a major military campaign in the southern Levant in 701. The campaign was carried out in 3 phases, directed against Phoenician cities, the Philistine cities Ashkelon and Ekron, and Judah, respectively. Before the military operations in Philistia, we read in Sennacherib's inscriptions that all the kings of the land Amurru brought extensive gifts, 4 times the normal amount, as their substantial audience gifts, before me and kissed my feet. Among the named kings we found, among others, Ayaramu of Edom, together with Budi-il of Bitaman and Kamusunatbi of Moab. According with the Baal inscription, the delivery of tribute took place in the plain of Ushu, namely the continental part of Tyre. Also in this case, Edom was not involved in anti-Assyrian activities and there were no military actions in Transjordan. The so-called Azekah inscription, from which only 2 fragments are preserved, report about a campaign against Judah, which may refer to Sargon's activities in the west in 720 or 712, or to Sennacherib's campaign in 701, and probably mentions also the payment of tribute of Western kings. Furthermore, the text reports in connection with the siege of a Philistine city that the king made all the troops of the land Amurru carry earth, most probably to build a siege ramp. The supply of military aid, workers, and provisions was among the vassal duties, and the possibility that Edomite troops participated in the construction of that siege ramps must be taken into account. In the year 677, Esarhaddon, Sennacherib's successor, undertook a punitive campaign against Abedimilkuti of Sidon. The city was conquered and destroyed, its territory annexed, and the new province was named after its capital, Kar Ashur Aha-Idina, Esarhaddon's harbor, a new foundation built in the proximity of the former center. Esarhaddon reports that he gathered all the kings of the land of Hatti and the sea coast and had them build the new city. In this case, the alleged kings are not named, but according to another passage of the same inscription, where 12 kings of the seacoast are listed, it is more than plausible that Edomite workers participated in the construction of the new provincial capital. At some point between 677 and 76, Esarhaddon summoned 12 kings of the seaside and 10 kings of the middle of the sea, namely Cyprus, and ordered them to send different kinds of wood and stones for the construction of his armory in Nineveh. Among the 12 kings of the seaside, a general designation of the southern Levant, we find the name Kaush-Gabri of Edom, together with Mutsuri of Moab and Budi-il of Bitaman. The royal name Kaush-Gabri is also attested in native sources, namely a seal impression from Umal Biyara and a limestone scaraboy from Babylon, both bearing the same text, belonging to Kaush-Gabar, king of Edom, who may have been the same king mentioned in Esarhaddon's inscription or a later successor. Sorry. Yes. We find exactly the same list of 22 kings characterized as king of the seacoast, the middle of the sea, with the addition and of the dry land, in the description of Ashurbanipal. In this case, the same kings, including again Kaush-Gabri of Edom, brought the tribute to the Syrian king during his first campaign against Egypt in 667 and provide military support. Around 652, Ashurbanipal campaigned against the Kedarite leaders Waite, referred to as king of the Arabs, and Amu Ladin, who had not kept their loyalty oaths, and attacked the kings of Amurru, namely of the west, thus interfering with the Assyrian interest in this region. For the first time, Assyrian military operations took place in the territory of the three Transjordan states, as the Arabs were pursued from the region south of Hamath up to Edom and defeated at different places. Among the listed places, not only Bet Aman, Ma'ab, and Udumu are included, but also Sa'ari, the biblical Seir, a toponym which usually appears related to Edom. According with the Neo-Assyrian written sources, Edom became a vassal of the Assyrian Empire probably during the reign of Adad-Nirari III at the beginning of the 8th century. Edom was seen as an independent state ruled by a king. The geographical name Udumu was in most cases written with the determinative kur, which denotes a land or region. With the sole exception of Sa'ari, it is the only toponym related to Edom. No cities or villages are mentioned, even the main center Buseira is not attested. But this must not wonder, as there were no military campaigns against Edom, and only in the course of a campaign against Arab tribes, the Assyrian army marched through Edomite territory. Edom remained a loyal vassal up to the fall of the Assyrian Empire at the end of the 7th century and was never annexed. It never participated in anti-Assyrian activities and was therefore never punished. Neither deportation of Edomites happened, nor deportees from other regions were ever settled in Edom. We know very few of Edom before the 8th century. Egyptian sources from the 13th and 12th centuries mention Shashu nomads in the Edomite plateau, and there is some evidence of mining activity at Fainan in the late 12th and 11th centuries. Archaeological surveys and excavation attest an intensive settlement in the late 8th century with a varied pattern of settlement types consisting in one main center with monumental architecture, Buseira, open villages and farms, few fortified farms, and some mountaintop sites. On the basis of this settlement pattern, it seems that Edom was a king-based kingdom with a ruling elite at the administrative center of Buseira, composed basically of different tribal groups that cooperated with each other and interacted with other groups from the neighboring regions. This model is compatible with the Assyrian sources, as the Assyrians' interlocutor was the king of Edom, which resided in Buseira. The intensification of the settlement, the constitution of a ruling elite, the attested industrial-scale copper mining, and the probable participation in the Arabian trade happened when the Assyrians began to take control over the wool Levant. At that time, Edom began to pay tribute and, more important, was able to do it. This development was by no means a coincidence, and it is therefore legitimate to ask which role played Assyria in the development of the Edomite society and the emergence of the Edomite tribal-based state. The impact of Assyria on the Edomite material culture was low, principally some architectural resemblance of the Area C palace and Area A temple at Buseira with Assyrian patterns, and the imitation of Assyrian carinated bowls. A low level of presence and of influence on the material culture is first to be expected in the case of Edom, considering the art of the Assyrian imperial policy, and second, cannot be confused with a low effect of the Western expansion of Assyria, the Assyrian Empire, on the social and political organization of Edom. As I have explained elsewhere, the Assyrian Empire was an empire without a mission, meaning a civilizing mission, comparable of that of the Roman Empire. It was not the intention of Assyria to Assyrianize the conquered territories, and especially the vassals. The Assyrian kings never intended to impose a religion or language and invested in infrastructure only when it was necessary, for instance, in a provincial capital or when outposts were needed. In the case of a loyal vassal who never caused trouble, was no Assyrian presence necessary. No Assyrianization do not mean no influence, but this influence was in most cases low and differed from region to region. In the case of Edom, it was probably a consequence of the desire of emulation of a surging new ruling elite. The Syrian Empire created an economic and political context in the southern Levant that allowed and maybe even stimulated a development in the social and political organization of Edom. The compulsion to pay tribute was an incentive for the development of the economy and the society. Furthermore, an intelligent policy of loyalty to the empire, followed by the Edomite ruling elite, avoid military confrontation with the consequent destruction, casualties, and eventually annexation. In this way, Edom could surge as a state and benefit from the good side of being part of a world empire. Thank you very much for your attention.